Okay, hello, this is Wmpyr. In this video, I want to talk about how Bruce Lee influenced my martial arts journey. Okay, obviously, he has influenced, inspired tons and tons and tons, millions of people. Um, and you hear about that often, but you don't really hear like the details. And I want to go into the actual details of how exactly did he inspire me. The obvious I think is the cross training aspect, and also the aspect on physical fitness. Those two are easily I think staple ways to be influenced from Bruce Lee. Where he encouraged you to not limit yourself to one style, or even like where you say, I'm Chinese, so I'm only going to do kung fu. Or I'm Japanese, I'm only going to do Japanese martial arts, or something along those lines. He was like, we're human beings, go beyond that. And so that's really, he's talking about, no limitations. He's talking about not being prejudiced and cross training. So those are, to me, wonderful, wonderful teachings. And then, of course, the physical fitness aspect, combat effective, combat practical body, you know. Now, um, so that's probably what most people think. That's what probably most people say. So like I said, I want to go into something different. Um, so for me, right off the bat, I remember um, seeing that he was much more than what you just saw in the movies. That the guy, when especially when you pick up his book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, there's philosophy in there that he got from Asian philosophy, from Zen Buddhism and stuff like that. And um, it's some really really amazing stuff that he put in there, and I think that gives it depth to his work. That he wasn't just a street fighter, or he wasn't just um, a martial arts fighter. That there was more to it than that. And by fighter, I'm talking about someone who was willing to put their mouth on the line when necessary. I'm not talking about like professional competition, because obviously that wasn't really his thing. Um, but the guy was clearly obsessed with street fighting, so that's another influence for me, where you know to me it's like he never forgot about that, no matter how much he went into sports, because he did see tremendous value in sports. And that's, I think, where a lot of people today, um, the anti-sports people, get it wrong. And people go, no, this is street, this ain't sport. You guys get it wrong. There's tremendous value in the combat sports, and Bruce Lee was quick to understand that, realize that, and he benefited tremendously from combat sports. But he never ever forgot about street. His, that was always there. And so that is something that has influenced me. And there was a time where I was heavily involved in combat sports, but like him, or following his teachings, I never forgot about the street. I always thought about no rules, multiple opponents, weapons, and now, after experiencing sport, because I could have easily been one of those people that say, no, that's sport. What I do is street, and not done the boxing, the wrestling, the BJJ, the MMA, the Muay Thai kickboxing. I could have skipped all that and say, no, I'm more into street. And that would just have been a lame excuse, and I would not have had the knowledge or the experience, or, I'm better because of that. Um, but a lot of people that do go into that, they also get brainwashed into that, and they think that's the way to go. And so that's what, like, more than 50% of the planet, the population thinks, combat sports is the way to go. Maybe more than that. Most people seem to think that the sport is the solution, and I don't think so at all. And that's for me. Thanks to Bruce Lee, thanks to Captain Fairbairn. I never ever forgot about that. The street and war. Yeah, that's in our nature, unfortunately. Um, so those are big influences for me. But still, both of those gentlemen, Bruce Lee and Captain Fairbairn, still understood the benefits of sport. I mean, Captain Fairbairn was a black belt judo guy from Kodokan back in the day. I mean, he achieved a pretty amazing rank, so the guy understood the value there. So yeah, you can't don't be one of these people that like sport that's the ring stuff. I see it on the comments all the time, and it's like, oh man, with that mentality, you're only you're missing out on a whole world of combat, because that is combat too, and that does that kind of stuff can occur in the street or in the battlefield. It can't, because it's human beings, just human beings fighting another human being. So no matter what the situation, when we fight, there's going to be similarities. So I've always said to you guys, is people like to look at differences when they're talking about street and sport. And I always said, if you only look at the differences, you're only getting half the picture, because the truth is there are similarities. So you need to look at similarities and the differences. So anyway, all that, like Bruce Lee didn't say that, but I got that because of his line of thinking. It is my own interpretation, my own evolution, whatever, but it comes from that. And then, Professor Danny Inosanto, being Bruce Lee's protege, Bruce Lee's pretty much main inheritor. For me, that is without a doubt. Some people like to question that. There are some jealous people out there, and they want to combat that, and they go, no, it wasn't Dan, it was this other guy or whatever. And the politics start coming in, but I feel like it's not that I'm super into this, but I feel like hands down it was Professor Danny Inosanto, and I'm fine with that. And I got into Filipino martial arts out of sheer luck. My instructor happened to be a big fan of Filipino martial arts back in the day. Today, my understanding is he is not. He hates it, my understanding. But back in the day, when I joined his school, he loved it. So it was one of the things that he taught. And so I joined his school at the right time. And that, for me, is big, because Filipino martial arts is my main style right now. It's become my main style. I've always kept it going, but there were times where I focused on other styles, but it is my main style today. And to me, that association with Jeet Kune Do and Filipino martial arts. So basically what Professor Dan did, Professor Dan Inosanto taught Jeet Kune Do and he taught Filipino martial arts, and his academy was both, I don't know if he was trying to be, part of it was trying to be humble, part of it was trying to directly follow what Bruce Lee told him, and another part of him felt like, Filipino martial arts is awesome. Like, it's that awesome that I put it together with Jeet Kune Do, and I'm going to teach it. So it could have been those three things, all three of those, where he just felt like, if I just taught Jeet Kune Do, it's almost like I am saying I am the number one Jeet Kune Do guy. And he never felt that way, So he, in a way, he was, I think, like, Bruce Lee passed the torch to you. And he's like, no, 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 that's not what happened, But in ways it was, but he, tried to keep that like humble approach, I feel like. And in this book I'm reading right now, I feel like it confirms that. So he didn't want to just teach Jeet Kune Do. He's Jeet Kune Do with FMA. I think he did that. And once again, Bruce Lee told him, he said, you're Filipino, you should do Filipino martial arts. I'm Chinese, I did Kung Fu. Come on, man. It's your roots. It's in your blood. Do it. But then Bruce Lee was also quick to say, don't limit yourself to that. And so I feel like Professor Dan followed to the T what Bruce Lee told him. And I believe Bruce Lee's message was, don't be my clone, be yourself. So your Jeet Kune Do shouldn't look like my Jeet Kune Do. And so in that sense, Professor Dan did an excellent job, in my opinion. And, that was the same thing that my lineage, Professor Remy Presa said, is, your modern Arnis won't be the same as my modern Arnis. He left that message to us. So that's what I've been doing. I've been following that too. And so Professor Dan Inosanto doing FMA, so now I'm talking about, it's Bruce Lee, but it's indirectly him. And that, the Jeet Kune Do plus FMA connection, because of Professor Dan, for me, that is another huge, huge influence in my life, because I'm a FMA guy, but I've been studying Bruce Lee to this day. And there was a time where, years ago, I felt like, okay, I'm done with Bruce Lee. Like, I've studied as much as I could. I'm over it. I'm moving on. But you know what? Now I find myself back going heavily into Bruce Lee's stuff, and it's just a part of, I've come to accept it, that, and what my big influence today, another big one, that huge part in my journey is, in the beginning, the way I saw Bruce Lee was honestly as an idol, a superstar. If Bruce Lee fought Conan the Barbarian, Bruce Lee would win. If Bruce Lee was part of the Avengers, he would be able to fight Thanos somehow. Just some kind of crazy, crazy stuff like that. That Bruce Lee was a godlike status in my mind. That he was the greatest ever. He would beat anyone in a street fight, anytime, any day, anywhere kind of thing. And it's just, what I was seeing was not possible. It's inhuman, and it is like a 13-year-old's brain, an 8th grader's brain. It's a fantasy world. And I never forgot the quote, even back then, that Bruce Lee said, the word superstar turns me off. I want to be seen as human, was his message in an interview that he did. And now I feel more than ever that I see him as a human being, yet, and I see him for all his faults, which I don't even know are 100% sure, but from my understanding, the things that I've learned about him are not nice, respectable things. In fact, I'll even tell you this. If he was alive today and he wasn't super famous so I could go learn from this guy, I wouldn't choose him. Because the guy, to me, was not a respectable person. That for me, for my standards, I would not pick this guy. And that sounds like I'm bad-mouthing this guy, but in Daniel Santos' book that I was reading, he had a choice between Ed Parker and Bruce Lee, and he chose Bruce Lee, and he thought to himself, did I make a mistake? That's how rough it was, even for someone like Professor Dan, who's probably way much more of a humanitarian than I ever will be. I try to be a decent person, but I have plenty of black spots, I'm just saying, I am human. I have plenty of errors and whatever. So I'm just saying, I feel like Professor Dan would be a much higher caliber of human than I am. I don't know the guy, but I'm just guessing. I bet he's made little less mistakes than I have, things that he would regret less than me. I think, it's my guess. But and I'm not trying to put the guy on a pedestal, but yeah, even he had trouble dealing with just Bruce Lee's attitude. He does say in the book that later on he missed the guy tremendously, and it becomes addicting. But I think Bruce Lee had that kind of personality where his charisma to this day is tremendous. It sucks people in. He had amazing charisma, so he was perfect for a movie star. But he knew that, and he understood that at a young age. He was already a movie star, so he knew how to charm people like that. But are those good qualities, the things that I'm looking for in a martial arts instructor? No, it's not. I don't want a cult leader. I don't want someone like that. And yeah, like I said, I'm not here to badmouth Bruce Lee, but I'm saying that I feel like I see him more truthfully, more complete. Yet I'm still in love with his work. His work still continues to influence me. I still have mad respect where I'm like, this guy's way beyond his time. Like, people don't understand, I feel like. People think like, oh, this guy was doing MMA before MMA. He was like the grandfather of UFC. If you think that's his greatest contribution, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think there's something way more than that he did, which was, like I said, it's what he was thinking is street. So UFC, as close as possible it is to one human being going up against another human being in the safest, most legalist manner possible in a competitive arena, it's still far from, like, for example, the UFC declined the Dog Brothers, where it's full contact stick fighting. So, and what I believe Bruce Lee was thinking about was even ahead of what the Dog Brothers was doing. So, I mean, and it's almost silly to say Bruce Lee, Dog Brothers, because Dog Brothers is, in a way, an indirect product of Bruce Lee, in my opinion. So, going full contact with weapons, I think, is something that Bruce Lee was aiming for, and also multiple attackers as well. And one of the guys that has brought this to my attention was Sifu Paul Vunak, and that was another big influence. But once again, that is Bruce Lee. That is an extension of Bruce Lee. So from Bruce Lee to Professor Dan to Sifu Paul Vunak, it is an extension. So the Jeet Kune Do has been a humongous influence in my martial arts journey. And seeing what I saw with Sifu Paul Vunak, he doesn't say this, but when I see his rap material, I believe that he got Jeet Kune Do, and then he got Captain Fairbairn, put them together, and you get the rat. I believe. He never says this, from my understanding. I never heard him say it. I never heard his students say it, but that's my guess. Why do I guess this? Because I myself, studied on my own Jeet Kune Do, but I am an FMA guy, and I got what I learned, and I've been a long-time Captain Fairbairn fan, and especially more in recent years, I've really put in the Captain Fairbairn. Before, it was just techniques and ideas that I really admired and liked, but now it's like, no, his is the model, the blueprint is Captain Fairbairn. I'm following that. I'm using that. And I created my B1 Escrima. So Captain Fairbairn became an incredible influence in that sense. I would say just as much as Bruce Lee. And for a while, Captain Fairbairn was more of a bigger influence. At first, it was Bruce Lee, hands down, and then I saw Captain Fairbairn's stuff back in 1994, and I was like, wow, but from there, I added his material to mine, and I was working on it, practicing and all that, researching and all that, and I always loved it, but only until more recent times did Captain Fairbairn's influence become like a rocket ship. And then it was like, Bruce Lee who? Like, I didn't even, until once again recently, Bruce Lee emerged back in my life. and I've been just blown away. It's really because of the fencing. My student over in Japan is he's been taking fencing for quite some time now, and I encouraged him to do it, and Dad has been, he tells me about it constantly, and that's a really, I'm like, Bruce Lee was doing this back in the day. He already knew the benefits of that, and me thinking about like ancient battlefield to ancient city life, this conversion, and how did the self-defense of back then, how was it done? Because it came fresh from the battlefields into city life, because the kingdom started getting, more and more united to where now you have full-blown countries. Once you have countries, it's less battlefield, it became less than before, and now you have countries. But now within the countries, in your daily life, you have to do self-defense. So what was that like? And can that be applied to today's self-defense? And my answer is absolutely yes. And I believe that is what Bruce Lee was doing back in the day. And I believe that is one of his greatest contributions. Self-defense wise, actual material wise, I would say that is his greatest contribution, is that material right there. And I feel like that is light years ahead of MMA. Today we live in an MMA world, and it's funny because back in 1993 when it came out, I was diving into it, and when people were still trying to decide what that was, and it hadn't caught on yet, and it was about to get banned and disappear and whatever, but then it overcame that, and then it had Tito Ortiz became champion, and now he's on TV all the time, and then they had reality TV shows, and then it just kept exploding to where it is today. But for me, it was like a been there, done that. So thankfully, because I got into the MMA stuff back when it was still called NHB, I got to experience that, and I was able to move on from that. If I was getting into MMA just now, then it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while. In fact, that took over 10 years, because at the end of the day, you have to be an athlete to be able to do combat sports, and I just sucked at it. So I'm not a natural athlete. Therefore, like I said, it took me over a decade of doing MMA. But like I said, back then it wasn't really called MMA. So anyway, but throughout that time, I never let go of FMA, and it was way more than 10 years. But let me just say, 10 years is when I really concentrated on MMA. So I'm just saying that. And the hardest part of that for me was BJJ. That was the most difficult. My brain would feel overloaded, and the training was really hard, and I just told myself, look, with boxing, it's going to be harder because you have to be more of an athlete. Maybe not so today, because I look at the BJJ people today and they're super athletes. So time has changed, But back then, like, you could see a BJJ athlete competitor, and you could see like a judo competitor, and guess who's physically the better athlete? Tend to went towards the judo people, especially back in the day. I think today less so. The BJJ athletes have gone tremendous. You see some monsters out there. And same with wrestling, BJJ and wrestling. If you compare the athletes, the wrestlers were way physically more dominant. But like I said, today I think the gap has slowly is changed. And then there's a lot of wrestlers now doing BJJ, and a lot of judo people doing BJJ. There's a lot of cross training now too. So back then it was, remember, more style versus style, BJJ versus judo, BJJ versus wrestling, But anyway, so I think I said a big statement about what was Bruce Lee's biggest innovative contribution, and I really feel like when you read Professor Dan's book about Jeet Kune Do, he talks about how, and I was totally incorrect, and I'll admit it 100 million times, was that the meaning of Jeet Kune Do is really a liberation. It is to help you not be limited to style. And I can tell you 100% right now, I am bound to my style, B1 Escrima. So I am not there. And I cannot really tell you what that's like to be what what Bruce Lee was talking about with the Jeet Kune Do. I'm not there. I just ain't. I can't let go. I don't want to let go. I'm happy where I'm at, but I'm not stupid. I understand, someone that's way better than me is saying this is the way to go, and this is the higher level mindset. I just can't fathom it yet because I'm not there. It's like trying to explain someone fourth dimension when that person lives in the third dimension, or someone in the second dimension trying to explain to them what the third dimension is like. Your brain's just not there. So, that's me right now. And also the philosophical part, a lot of that was influenced from Bruce Lee, and to the point where it became very natural for me. So I would talk to people from religion or other spiritual beliefs, and I would be able to converse with them. I'm not saying that I knew everything, no, but I would be able to understand what they were trying to tell me, at least to a certain degree, and a lot of that came from Bruce Lee's philosophy. But in my art, B1 Escrima, my style, I try to keep it simple, so I don't put in the philosophy. I've tried to write it down, my code of honor, my philosophy, my spiritual beliefs and stuff like that. I tried to write it out, and then I was just like, no. So I just threw it out. It just didn't feel right for me to put it down. So for me to teach my students and stuff, I try. Some of that's in there, but really I focus more on the curriculum, the direct curriculum. So I don't put that in there. Bruce Lee can handle that, obviously. And he not only can handle it, he enjoyed it and he loved it, and he taught it constantly. And they were quoting that stuff back and forth to each other, from what I could tell from Professor Dan's book. And yeah, and that's just not me. And I'm not at that level to where I could handle that. So I don't put that in there. I'm taking more of the Captain Fairbairn approach, which is the bare bones minimum. This technique, this tactic, for this situation, and that's it. And for this other situation, this technique, this tactic, and just honestly, it's like a bunch of lists. So I'm trying to do that with my work is to keep it as simple as possible. Don't convolute it with philosophy. Nothing amazing, spiritual or anything like that. My art, I want it to be. My style is simple, quick, easy to learn. It doesn't take 4 or 5 years. No, I don't. I want the opposite of that. I want it as simple as possible. And yeah, I understand that the quality is going to drop. It's like what I want is my style B1 Escrima to be almost like a Swiss Army knife, and not even like a Leatherman tool where it's a lot more extensive and has a bunch more stuff. No, like a small Swiss Army knife where it has the basics in there, and that's it. And then but I do want to make it clear for you guys that if you want to go deeper, if you want to expand upon that, this is the route that I took, so you can take this route. You can see I'm going to quote my sources. Where does this stuff come from? My ideas, where it came from, how I developed it. I want to put all of that in there, but that's more for for most people, it's just going to be entertaining, hopefully entertaining to read that. And for other people that do want to see where did this guy get this from, or how did he think in order to figure that out, that's there for you. That you'll see that it's different from I just stole it from somebody on YouTube, or I just stole it. I thought it was cool, so I just put it in randomly. No, you're going to see it's a little bit different than that. And so I have no shame in citing my sources. And I think that's important and necessary. But other than that, the curriculum itself, I want to keep it mega, 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 mega simple. And that's more Captain Fairbairn than Bruce Lee. But Bruce Lee helped me realize that I want to go the opposite route from him. And it makes sense to me, because if I was as talented as he was, sure, I could do philosophy. I could make it it's a spiritual awakening where you liberate yourself to where you now, it's like, what's your style? No style. What are you talking about? I do everything. I wish. I'm not there. So, let's keep it real. I'm not at that level. Probably never will even get to a tenth of that level. So let's do what I can do. And that's what I've always been interested. The average person, me. I represent the average person. The only thing I have above a lot of other people is I was dedicated. And to this day, I'm dedicated. But there's people that have done it longer than me, been in martial arts longer than me, people that train more than me. So, whatever. So even that, my superpower is dedication, but it's not even that much. But compared to other people, it just depends on where you're looking at. I've had amazing, talented people that could wipe the floor with me in a street fight, and they only did it for 2 years or 3 years, and that's it. They never touched it again in their life, So it's just, people are different. But for me, that has been my greatest strength. So the average person like me, without the dedication, can you do this, what I'm teaching? And that's what I'm interested. I wanted to make that product. And I believe that is exactly what Captain Fairbairn did, because he cares about his country. He doesn't want his peoples to just get killed. So when there was a threat of Germany invading the UK, he wanted every single one of those citizens to be able to have at least some kind of fighting chance, fighting idea. So his book, Get Tough, was designed not just for soldiers, not just for elite soldiers, special forces. It was for elite, normal soldiers, and regular citizens as well. And the book says that. It's in the beginning, the prologue of the book. You can read it. So that is pretty much the idea that I have, is to have the most basic level 1, but then from there you can go higher and higher. So if you are special forces, you can, or if you are a lifelong martial artist or whatever, you can take it up to your level. But yeah. So that is what I'm working on, and all this, like I said, big influence from Bruce Lee. So anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for viewing, and take care, folks.